All right, we want to get this session underway. This is the orientation session for our 35th annual CALLERLAB convention. We'd like to welcome you and thank you guys and gals for being here. How many of you are first-time attendees? Let's give all our first-time attendees a nice round of applause. It's nice to have you. We're going to talk a little bit more about what the convention, what's involved with the convention, and what are some of the things you might be looking at. But we want to first give you a little bit of history of CALLERLAB and go back a little way. And one of the reasons why we put this photo up was because this is the original meeting of callers that met at Asilomar, California, up around Pacific Grove up there, just north of the 17-mile drive, if you're familiar with that area. A beautiful little place right along the beach, and most of the artwork and most of the buildings that are done in Asilomar were done by a gal that did all of the work for Hearst Castle and the various castles up there. She worked under a surname or an initials only type name because at that time the architects weren't women, but she was really stellar, and it really is a marvelous place to dance. Square Dance Weekends went back to 1951 in that particular area. But you might look at some of the callers up there, and I'm sure some of you could name them all. John, you want to go ahead and give it a try? Why don't you step up to a mic, because this session is being recorded, so we want to make sure if you ask a question that it gets on the microphone.
Top row from left to right. Bob Osgood, Arnie Cronenberger, C.O. Guest, Frank Lane.
No. Okay, that's good.
You're close.
Bottom row on the bottom right is Dave Taylor, yep. Bob Van Antwerp, Joe Lewis, Bruce Johnson, and Ed Gilmore, and down the very front was Flippo and Bob Page.
Okay, anybody want to correct him?
The one that you call C.O. Guest is Bruce Johnson.
That's Bruce Johnson on the top. On the top of there's Bruce.
Who's next to Gilmore?
And then down there's Lee Helsel. Lee Helsel. Who's the only one at our convention here today? This convention. Marshall Flippo. Flip, stand up. He's the only one out of those original members that's here and actively involved and still pleasing the dancers as he goes. Dave Taylor's been retired from calling for 10 years, 15 years. He's 100. Yeah, he's 104. And Frank Lane was at our convention last year. The interesting thing about this photo, John, you want to tell him about this photo? Because I believe it was John's idea to do this.
Well, out of all these people up here, Flippo's the only one still living. There's two of them that claim to be alive, but Frank Lane and Dave Taylor are still alive, but Flippo's still out running around. But Dave Taylor and I were talking a few months ago about this photo and those that were in it at this first meeting. And he said, Frank is not in the picture. I've got the original picture and he's not in it. I said, well, let's superimpose him in the picture. He said, well, I got to get a picture of Frank. So we chased down this picture of Frank, which was about the same time. Frank was in bed sick with the flu and wasn't able to be there when the picture was made. So he got this picture of Frank and superimposed him. That's right here.
Frank didn't have the flu.
Huh?
Frank did not have the flu.
Don't tell that.
Oh, he was not in bed with the flu? What was her name then?
He was not in bed. He didn't have the flu.
What was it?
No, we were sending him out because we were going to have a picture made. We sent him out there to Kmart.
Because you didn't want him in the picture. So that's how that picture got made, and Dave's wife did this, as Kathy told me just a few minutes ago, and did a really good job of putting Frank in it.
Anyway, it's a great photo, and just kind of speaks volumes. There's some interesting material that's available and that's around that primarily came from Bob Osgood, because Bob was really the person behind the idea of CALLERLAB. And although there were a lot of people talking about it, he was the one that really kind of put it all together. And so some of their notes and their invitations, because there were other people that were invited to that first meeting and could not make that meeting. Subsequently, I believe the second meeting was in 1973. This was 71, I think. And but anyway, and of course our first convention was 1974. And so we really have kind of an amazing history. These were the people that were really the primary movers and shakers around the country and traveling around and calling quite a bit at the time. And it was felt like if they could bring together a body of knowledge and to get things together, because a lot of people talk about before CALLERLAB, and those of us that were calling or dancing back then realized that it was time. We needed some organization. We needed a group to come together and to try to make some sense out of all the new movements that were coming out and just filling our activity. Most of our clubs danced maybe anywhere from 5 to 10 new experimentals a week, and it was just common for callers to come in and teach different things. And you couldn't go to different places in the world in square dance because everybody had a little bit of a different list. So it was an interesting time. Anyway, to go further along about the history of CALLERLAB and more information is our third chairman of the board and milestone recipient and credited caller coach. How about a nice hand for Jon Jones?
Thank you, Mike. And that's Mike Seastrom who's been talking to you for the benefit of the tape and those of you who may not know who Mike is. And he was also chairman of the board following Ernie Kinney, I believe. And he served 2 years as chairman of the board. In 1960, Bob Osgood, we'll point out, make sure you know who he is, organized a meeting in Glenwood Springs, Colorado, with Frank Lane, Ed Gilmore. Mike, would you point these out? Frank Lane's on the far right, Ed Gilmore's on the far left, and Bruce Johnson, who's the dark-headed guy in glasses in the back. And you notice that Flip still had a little bit of hair left when that picture was made. But anyhow, those 4 guys had a meeting in Glenwood Springs, Colorado, to begin talking about the possibility of an International Square Dance Callers Association. And they thought it would be a good idea. Bob Osgood being the owner of Sets in Order magazine, the only international publication of square dance magazines that we had at that time, organized this meeting, and it was his idea to try to organize. During the 1960s, there was another caller, whose name is Les Gocher, tried to organize the International Brotherhood of Square Dance Callers. And he got a few members, but I think never more than about 100 members joined the organization that he was trying to form. He wound up having to give back some of the money because it didn't go very far. And then there was not another meeting. This group decided to organize the Gold Ribbon Committee. And they began to put together a list of calls that perhaps the world could do without very rapid change. And so they developed a handbook of a list of the basic 25 calls. Then a couple of years later, they developed and added 25 more, which made the basic 50. Well, there was enough callers producing calls and getting them published, and callers were using them all over the country, that they decided to expand that and develop the extended 75. So then we had 75 calls in this booklet, and as Mike was saying, callers were writing calls faster than the ink could dry, combining numerous other calls into one and giving it a name. And I think mostly to see their name in print. I made the suggestion that if we could quit printing their name, they'd quit writing them. But it was going at a rampant situation, and there's no way that the dancers could keep up with the calls that were being introduced in the programs every single night. And many of us callers felt like that if we didn't introduce something new every night, that we weren't pleasing our dancers. We really didn't know how stupid we were in trying to do that. But that was the rage in those days. At the National Convention in Salt Lake City, the first one that they had, which was in the late 60s, and I'm sorry I cannot tell you the exact year. Does anybody remember? It was like 1967 or 68. 67, you think, Cappy? And that could be very well right. I knew what was going on with some of these group of people because I had an inside person telling me, not one of these. His name was Manning Smith, and he knew what was going on. But he was not that involved with it, but in the conversations with Bob Osgood. And so he was relaying the information to me. I can tell that story now because nearly all of these people are gone, which is sad for me because they're all personal friends of mine. And for those of you who may not know, if you know Manning and Nita Smith, who in my opinion were the renowned round dance instructors of the world, Nita passed away just this past Wednesday, and her funeral service is going to be tomorrow. And Deborah and I went down to see her in the hospital last Saturday. So anyway, I can tell this story now because they're not here to beat me over the head or tell me that I shouldn't. And I think they would not mind anyway. So I talked to Bob Osgood at the Salt Lake City National Convention and asked him what was happening with the Gold Ribbon Committee and his thoughts and ideas of trying to organize an International Callers Association. And he said that they had dropped the idea because it looked like it was too insurmountable to do. And we talked for quite a long time. He told me a couple of years later that it was my fault that he started trying to put it together again. I said, well, I'll accept that blame. I have no problem with that. So in 1971, this group of callers got together and they organized CALLERLAB. They are the original members, or the original organizers. Then they each invited other callers to attend. Now, these callers that attended this first meeting and all of those that were invited to attend were the people that Bob Osgood and the Sets in Order International Square Dance Society had placed in their, what they call, Square Dancing Hall of Fame. And they invited all of those Hall of Fame members to attend this meeting. But these are the only ones that were able to attend. Then they, as Mike said, they again met in 1973, where they had each invited one or two other callers to attend. And out of that group of callers, they decided to have our first CALLERLAB convention in St. Louis, Missouri in 1974. And that was the first convention. There were like 105 of us that attended that, along with several other partners. Maybe 20 to 25 partners attended that convention as well. You may recall or have heard the name of Ray Smith. He was invited to attend this first meeting but was unable to. And Ray was getting elderly, a big man, 6'6", 250 pounds. And when Ray spoke, everybody listened. And he was not going to go to that first convention in St. Louis. And so I was contacted by Bob and said, you got to try to get Ray there. We're going to give him a special award if he'll come. So I twisted his arm and got him to go. And after it was over with, he said, you know, they gave me enough energy, I can make it another 10 years. And it was shortly after that he wound up going to the Valley of Texas and calling in one of the snowbird trailer parks down there. And he and Ralph Silvius were the first two callers in the Texas Valley to do that. And Ray told me he was having a ball. He called as many times a week as he wanted to, and all he had to do was put out the word, and he'd gather a room full of people. and he would teach them to square dance and call square dances to them. And it was really quite interesting to hear him do that. Well, at that first convention, we also had Dr. Lloyd Shaw's wife, Pappy Shaw's wife, Dorothy, there, and she gave our keynote address at our banquet that evening, and it was real interesting to hear her talk. And through and since that particular meeting, one of the main reasons, as Mike said, to organize CALLERLAB was to try to curtail the amount of calls that were coming out every month. There were about 4 note services across the country, and they were all producing anywhere from 10 to 20 new calls every month. And it was just unbelievable. Some you may never hear again. So in organizing CALLERLAB, and shortly after that, we began the committees that we have operating today. And in your packet, you should have had a list of all of the committees that CALLERLAB has operating today. And there are 25 of them listed on that sheet of paper. And there are several other ad hoc and subcommittees working on other things as well. So all of those committees that are listed on that sheet of paper are open for membership, and it covers every aspect of our activity that we are involved in, from the basic program all the way through C3A, I believe. And we have committees working on it. Some of them have a little bit of restrictions for being able to be a member of a particular committee. But look around at those committees, those of you who are new, and try to pick out 1 or 2 or 3 or 4, or ever how many you feel like you can work with and work on, and become a member of the committees. You will find out how our organization operates. I was trying to remember today how many different committees I'm involved with, and I'm on the mainstream committee, and I'm on the plus committee, and I'm on the caller coach committee, and I'm on the caller training committee, and I'm also chairman of the application review committee. And so I stay pretty busy. If I spend as much time doing my own personal things and trying to make a living for myself as I do working for CALLERLAB, I'd probably be a wealthy man today. But it's a work of love, and we've really enjoyed it. We hope you do. We want you to enjoy the convention, and I'll be glad to answer questions or anything of that nature if anybody can think of one along the way. The first chairman of our board was Jim Mayo. He was the first elected chairman of the board. When we first got started, Bob Osgood was the executive secretary because he put it together and he kept the ball going. The second year of our operation, Stan Burdick was our executive secretary. Both voluntary jobs, no pay. The first paid employee that we had, at the time his title was executive secretary, and it's later been changed to executive director, was John Kaltenthaler, and he's sitting here in our audience. John, let's stand up and be recognized, please, if you would. He's our first executive director. And the first paid employee that we had. And really glad at the point to where he finally was able to make the announcement at one of our opening sessions of our convention that we are now solvent. So he knew he was going to get his paycheck that night. But a lot of us have done a lot of work for the organization and will continue to do so as long as we can. And I had the privilege, as Mike said a while ago, of being the third chairman of the board of this organization. And it was here in this hotel that I became chairman of the board. It was also here in this hotel that in the ballroom, you will notice when we get in there, there are lights that hang on the wall that have little crystal dangles coming down off of them, that John spent the first 15 minutes of my chairmanship walking back and forth behind me, banging his head into those things, making noise and interrupting me. I finally told him, just sit down somewhere. You know. I don't know whether they're still in the ballroom or not. We'll find out when we go in there. So if there's any little lights hanging on the wall that have crystal dangles hanging down, you'll know that that's what that was. But any questions that anybody has of me or Mike or Janet as we go along, please ask them, okay? Thank you.
I put up this slide because there are a few goals and objectives that we look at as a Callers Association, and the primary one is to simply attract and to educate and to recruit new callers as well as our existing callers. It's a huge task. There's a tremendous amount of information out there, and there's a tremendous amount of information on the CALLERLAB website. How many have not been on the CALLERLAB website? I love it. It's a great website. Of course, there's a lot flashier websites out there, but it's a great website with a lot of information, and so take advantage of that. Ron, do you want to speak on? That's right. Ron needs a computer to get on the website. You do have to have a computer to get on, but you can go to the public library and check on a computer. They're free, and just go on there and take a pencil and paper, and particularly if you got some kind of a ability to get to a printer, and because there's a lot of stuff you can just print out, and it's nice. Got an extra one? If anybody's got an extra computer,
I got one. It won't work. I'll be glad.
Listen, I'd like to go a little bit more over what's in your packet, but before I do that, I'd like to introduce the Vice Chairman of the Partners Committee, because Janet has some good information to talk about, specifically about the Partners part of the program, which I've always felt is a major part of our program, and we like our partners involved. And so Janet Olivieri from Colorado, she's going to talk about, she's the Vice Chairman. Let's bring her on with a nice round of applause. Janet?
Thank you. Welcome to the CALLERLAB Convention. Isn't this a great site and great weather? I understand it's supposed to snow 4 to 8 inches in Denver tonight. I'm so glad to be here. I too wanted to go over what's in your packet. And I wanted to start with, so I'll probably step on Mike's, on his toes, but first of all, you have these great little pink papers. These have your menu and your agenda for the banquets. And we all know that square dancers and callers like to eat. When you go to the banquet or any meal, you must wear your badge. And you will hear this many times, because without a badge, no food, no exception. And while I'm talking about badges, if you look around, there's ribbons on the badges, on several badges. They indicate different things. They may indicate that someone's on the Board of Governors, or they're a chair or vice chair for a committee. Our guests have ribbons that say VIP. The brown ribbons that look like this are our first-time attendees. And if you look around, you'll see a lot of brown ribbons. What I'd like to know is, how many of you are partners of first-time attendees, or partners in general of callers? Welcome. I'm really glad to see you. And I'm glad to see that we have some gentlemen, because men can be caller partners also. Since we have women callers, we can have men partners. Okay. Okay. Also in your packet is little mini schedules and expanded schedules. On the back of the mini schedule is a map so you can find your way around. And in the expanded schedule are descriptions of each one of the sessions and events. What my husband and I like to do, my husband Mike is the caller, we like to go over the schedule individually and mark what interests us as an individual. And then what we do is we compare notes and decide who's going to go where. We call this divide and conquer, because if you divide up and your caller goes in one direction and the partner goes another direction, you get twice the information and you can take home double what you find out. Once you get back to your room at night, if you're not too exhausted, you can compare notes. And in my case, I want to compare notes while I can still read my notes, because I'm usually scribbling some I was told the day that nobody ever sees me without a pen. That's my security blanket. But get back to your room, compare notes, and what I found is, as a partner, I can take some of this information that I've learned in the sessions, and I can take it home with me and use it in my job, in the things that I do with my church, and the volunteer work that I do. So not only is it good for callers and CALLERLAB, but also for me. And this brings me to the Partners Committee. Now, the Partners Committee is made up of men and women. And back when my parents were square dancing, the caller's partner was usually their wife. And I hope I don't offend anybody, but from my perspective, that partner was expected to make sure the caller looked perfect, that he arrived at his dance on time, that she looked beautiful, and she was the perfect father knows best little wife. That's my perspective. Like I said, I hope I don't offend anybody by that. Today, partners' involvement is a lot more. We can do as little or nothing as we want, but yet let our caller develop his career, or become totally involved in every aspect and help the caller do whatever it takes to be successful, or someplace in between. Partners are involved to the degree that they feel comfortable. And just as partners have evolved their position in the local areas back home, so have they evolved in the partners committees and with CALLERLAB. Back in the early days of CALLERLAB, Erna Egender, thank you, who was a partner, decided that the partners needed to get together to share information that related to being a caller partner. They discussed what was expected of them, what they did do and didn't do, and why. Partner sessions back then consisted of sharing patterns, recipes, crafts, and eventually the development of a partner's handbook, which has since become obsolete. However, the partners were not allowed to serve on any other CALLERLAB committee. A few years ago, Bev Sutter, chairperson of the Partners Committee, put forth an idea to the Board of Governors that the partners be allowed to be active members of other CALLERLAB committees. As partners, they wanted to offer their thoughts, their ideas, skills, talents, and education for the benefit of CALLERLAB. The Board of Governors approved, and although the partners cannot be voting members of CALLERLAB because they don't pay dues, they can still become involved and contribute to the committees that interest them. However you look at the role of the partner, whether it's in the Partners Committee or another committee, they are there as a source of support to the callers and to CALLERLAB. After all, there is no such thing as a non-supportive partner. At this CALLERLAB convention, the Partners Committee is sponsoring 3 sessions. Our committee meeting will be Monday morning at 10:45 in the New York room. We will continue to develop a mentoring program for first-time convention attendees, and we'd love to have your input, especially if you are one of those first-time attendees. We want to know, what would you have liked to have seen now if this program was in place? We'll also be looking for our future ideas for future partner sessions. Next on Monday afternoon at 2:30 in the St. Louis room, we're going to have Gail Gordon doing a life balance workshop. Gail is a partner of a caller. She's a psychologist and a life coach, and her sessions are always really fun and educational. And then on Tuesday, we'll have our Partners Informal, and this is where you can bring your thoughts, your ideas, your comments. If you just want to vent, if you're upset about something, come and let us know. Let's see if we can brainstorm and work it out. There's no recorders in that session, so you can feel free to come and speak openly. All 3 sessions are open to any person attending the convention, whether you're a caller or a partner or a guest. Whatever you decide to do, I challenge you to be more involved. Join committees, attend interest sessions, make your thoughts and ideas known. CALLERLAB is always looking for new ideas, and the direction CALLERLAB takes depends on the participation of its members and their partners. In your package, you will find a list of committees that you may want to join. The committees have, with 1 asterisk, have prerequisites, and the committees with 2 asterisks are open to all the partners. So look it over and see if there's something that really interests you. And last but not least, in your package, there's a critique sheet. Make sure you fill it out. It's really important. And make sure you turn it in before you leave. If you forget and you find it when you're unpacking when you get home, send it back to the home office as soon as possible. Every one of them is read, and it determines where CALLERLAB will be headed in the future. There's a place on it for an idea for themes of CALLERLAB, and if they choose your idea, you could win CALLERLAB dues for a year. Are there any questions? Thank you.
I meant to mention earlier when I was talking that to emphasize our theme for this convention, which is lights, camera, action. And that's in keeping with the fact that we're so close to Hollywood. And this theme was thought up and submitted to the executive committee by Vernon Jones, my oldest son. And by doing so, you will find on the critique sheets a place for you to submit a suggestion for a theme. And the chosen theme, that person receives free dues for a year. So keep that in mind, okay?
Very good. Very well said, John. What's interesting is that Janet was talking about the critique sheets, and each year the executive committee, which is made up of 5 members of the Board of Governor, of course the chairman, the vice chairman, then 3 other members of the executive committee, along with the executive director, the assistant executive director, meet 2 times a year for about 3 days solid. And their early spring meeting, the first thing they do, of course, is run all these off, and every one of the executive members reads every one of these critique sheets, writes things down, formulates some opinion, because when they go into that first spring meeting, that's the planning session for the next convention. So there's a tremendous amount of discussion about these critique sheets. What were some of the issues with the hotel? What were some of the suggestions for panelists? They're looking for new people, new faces to be members to be on panels, to be moderators for sessions. So we want this information, and we take these real seriously. So as Janet said and as John reiterated, make sure you fill these out. This is really, really important. The other thing is that most of us that have been at conventions a while take this sheet that has the map on it and the daily schedule that's really quick, and we fold it up and we stick it in our pocket, and you can kind of fold it in 3s because the 3 days go accordingly. But this thing, just carry this thing around with you, because it really is you can mark it up, you can mark down the sessions you want to go to, but make sure you use this one. This is your working copy. Keep this in your pocket, okay? This one here, this is kind of where you can really find out what the sessions are all about. So I would suggest sit down with this and run through some of these sessions that maybe you've checked off on this smaller sheet and really read what these are all about, okay? Because this has a tremendous amount of information, and you can follow it all through the back, and it has some more information about committees and other things. So make sure you see this. Also at this convention, we're going to have a photographer who can take portraits, and there's quite a few of us that probably need to update our photos. And so this is a great opportunity. He's going to be there. Yeah. So take a look at this. This company, The First Image, they'll be, I believe, at one of the banquets. I believe this is the Tuesday night banquet, I think. But make sure you get out here and fill that out. And if you want to update your portrait, do that. Okay. The other thing is that there's a tremendous company that CALLERLAB has worked with, or had the privilege to work with, for quite a few years. And it's the Convention Tapes International, or Convention CDs, Inc. These guys are great. Scott in the back there, many of you know Scott. Nice hand for Scott. Scott's here again and his crew. They tape all of the sessions, and believe me, there's some sessions you're going to go to that you're going to want to, you can't take notes, or some of the things you're just not going to be able to pick up. And there'll be sessions that you're going to miss just because you can't make them all. Make sure you see Scott and his crew. There's a form here. You can look at all these particular sessions. You can have them on CDs. You can have them on MP3s. You can buy 1 CD at a time. You can buy 13 sessions. You can buy a full set. It's really worthwhile, because over the course of the next year, you can plug these in as you're driving down the road to your next dance, and you can listen to a session. It's really enlightening, and a lot of times you listen to a session like this on the way to a dance, and it really charges you up. So you walk into that dance, you're ready to go. It does me. I got back when we were doing CDs, and I back when we were doing cassette tapes, and so it's great. And the pink stuff, we already talked about the food. This is the card I wanted to talk to you about, the vote card. Don't take this one lightly. On Wednesday, we do a series of motions, and these motions are spelled out in 3 pages. These are resolutions that have been submitted, and these 3 pages are in your packet. One of them is about the glossary. You can read the motion. You can read the information about the glossary. You can also talk. There's a little section here for CALLERLAB dress code for members, a little short thing. And there's also some pictograms and formations and some information here. When these come up for a vote on Wednesday, you're going to be using this card. So bring this to the Wednesday meeting. If you have questions about these, I would highly advise that you might attend one of the Board of Governor informals, which are sessions where there are 3 to 4 Board of Governor members that are just there to talk and discuss things. So if you have something that's that you're thinking about, an idea, you've got an issue that you want to talk about, attend those Board of Governor informals. They're great sessions, and they're just chaired or moderated, or there's about 3 different Board of Governor members that are there. So attend those, and you can ask some questions about these issues. This may be addressed also at the Monday morning meeting tomorrow. Now, tomorrow there's breakfast is not in your package. So if you're thinking about breakfast, you might be kind of scouting out a place tonight. I don't think Domino's delivers real early in the morning, but you could have it delivered tonight and save it for the morning. Or there's room service. There's a lot of different options. But after that, then every meal will be taken care of until we adjourn on Tuesday night. Okay? I think that's pretty much our packet. Any questions? Phil? I am not cooking breakfast. No, tomorrow I think the best thing is that pizza that's delivered tonight. Eat about half of it tonight and save the rest for breakfast tomorrow. That's probably your best bet. John?
Go ahead. I have a question. How come we don't have 4 or 5 days of CALLERLAB instead of just 2 days and cram everything in all in one sector?
The question is, why don't we have 4 days or so of CALLERLAB convention instead of just the 2.5 days like we have? John, you want to?
Because there's so many things we're going to miss no matter what you do.
Can't afford it. It gets pretty expensive. We're all paying a bunch of money to be here, and it's just everybody doesn't feel like the majority of people can and think they can't afford it. Ron, would be the main reason, and Phil, it wouldn't bother you to skip breakfast in the morning. I'm bad, aren't I? I earned the right to be that way. And we're being invaded by Japanese. We have lots of Japanese with us. Nice to have you. We had Don Casper is emceeing an Overseas Callers Dance tomorrow night. Don is right here in front. He's a member of ECTA, which is the European Callers and Teachers Association. How many overseas callers do we have? Not counting the Japanese, other than Japanese. Okay, we have several. Some from Switzerland and England, and of course Japan, Germany, Canada, Texas. If you don't know where Texas is, from here you go east until you smell it and keep going until you step in it. And you'll be there. Also in Texas, we have just finished very recently organizing the Texas Callers Hall of Fame. And my wife Deborah happens to be president of the Texas State Callers Association this year. And through her efforts, she got the ball rolling to finally get it done, and has been working on it for quite some time. And one of our first of the 3 recipients is here tonight, and that's Marshall Flippo, and we welcome you again. The reason I said that, because I know he won't tell you. If somebody doesn't happen to know it, he'd never mention it. But Bill Boyd, who is the owner-editor of American Scorenates magazine. Bill, hold up your hand so everybody can see who you are, is here with us. And he's also trying to learn how to call.
I got to make a living somehow.
He wants to make some of the big bucks. He's been to our caller school, and he's planning to come again. I don't know why, but he is. But I think just to be with us and to socialize more than anything else. But Bill did run a nice article in the American Scorenates magazine about the Texas State Callers Hall of Fame, and that was really nice. To appreciate that. Anybody got any comments or questions? Now, I want to encourage all of you to get involved in the sessions that you attend. Don't just go in there and sit and look, and after it's over with, then get outside. Well, why didn't they do this, and why didn't they do that, and why didn't they talk about this, and why didn't they talk about that? Well, how are they going to know to talk about it if you don't bring it up? So get involved. Okay? Will you do that? Cappy?
Who all other than the senior citizen back there was inducted into your...
The first inductees into the Texas Callers Hall of Fame was Jim Brower from Texarkana, Texas, and he's 92 years old. Of course, he doesn't call anymore, but he was there, and his whole family was there. We notified them, and they all came, and of course, they didn't live too far from where we did. We did it in Paris, Texas, and then Flip, and then the other one was Tex Brownlee. And unfortunately, Tex passed away in January, but we got to do this back in September. I called Flip, and I said, we're going to do this Texas Callers Hall of Fame thing up at Paris, Texas, where he and the Chaparral guys, Gary Shoemake and Ken Bauer and Jerry Haig and him, were conducting a weekend. And I said, we're going to induct Jim Brower and Tex Brownlee. He said, oh, great, I'll be there. Of course, I knew he was going to be there anyway. So I called Jim Brower, and I told him we were going to get it done, and we finally got it set up, and we were going to do it. And I said, we're going to induct Flippo and Tex Brownlee. And he said, okay, I'll be there. So then caller Tim Till from Texas knew one of Jim Brower's daughters, and he contacted her, and she contacted the whole family, and there's 4 kids, and all the grandkids showed up. And so Tex was living in Dallas. He moved to Dallas about 5 or 6 years ago. His wife, Jean, passed away 6 years ago she passed away. Anyhow, we called Tex, and I called his son and told him what was going on. I said, help me talk Tex into going, because Tex had the lung problems and cancer that you get from breathing asbestos, which he got during World War II. And he said, okay, so I'd talked to Tex, and he said, I don't know whether I'll feel like it. And I said, yeah, you got to go. So we didn't tell him anything that was going on, because Deborah and I went by and picked him up, and we knew he couldn't leave until we got ready to go. So we drug all 3 of them up there and surprised each one of them. And of course, when I started talking about Flip, gave the introduction of each of the 3 of them. And when I started talking about Flip, I said, well, he started calling in 1960. He didn't know who we were talking about, because I skipped 10 years of his calling until he finally told who he was. I think he was surprised anyway. But we got it done. And hopefully there'll be some more. I didn't mean to take up so much time. Please ask questions or make comments if you have anything.
John made a great point. Don't ever be bashful about speaking up at these sessions. CALLERLAB is a place where we're all peers here, and it's one of the nicest things about this organization. And when I first came as a brand new person to this organization, I suddenly felt like I was peers with some of my heroes, and it really is the place where everybody has a place here. And so please, as John said, speak up, talk your mind, ask questions. If you've got an idea, bring it out. We really need that. John?
I'd like to make a comment on Convention Tapes International, whatever you call it this year. I met Scott back in 1980 when they first started taping for us. And if you are active in a local callers association, It's a great thing to make into your callers library so that you can give to the callers that are just coming on. When we made copies of the best of the CALLERLAB tapes, the one on education and teaching, I think there were about 14 or 15 tapes, and they consolidated those down to about 3 tapes of a whole bunch of things. And Betsy Gata has been working on them to put them on CDs. And if you belong to a local callers association, get approval to buy the complete set, because it's the best thing in the world for callers that are just trying to get started. And I totally encourage you to do that. And Scott doesn't pay me for that.
There's great information. I don't care if you've been teaching a long time. There's great information on those tapes and those CDs, not only for new callers, but for callers that are currently teaching and have been teaching a long time. Mike?
Just a quick touch on protocol as far as the tapes also, or the CDs. When you do make a comment, first of all, state your name, Mike Olivieri, Denver, Colorado, and be sure and come up to the microphone and ask your question. Otherwise, when you buy the CD or MP3, what you hear is, that was a good question. Now let me answer that for you.
Exactly. And Mike brings up a real good point. It helps for the CD, and it really helps everybody else in the room. So rather than just sitting in your spot, there's microphones in all these sessions. Come up, and every session that's being taped, come up and stand in front of the microphone and speak say what you have to say. Mike, as Mike said, introduce yourself, say your name, where you're from, and it's always really helpful for the CDs and for the tapes. It really makes a big, big difference. The other thing that I would like to say is that there are members here that will be celebrating their 25th year of calling, and they'll get their quarter century awards. Got any quarter century award people here at the orientation session? Anybody? Scott? Yeah? This year, 25. Now, we've also got some 50-year people that have been calling 50 years. Any 50-year recipients here? John? Wade? Yeah? Flippo? No, Flippo's been 57, 58? 82? Listen, we'd like to thank you for attending the orientation session. But first, before we go, any other questions? Wait, there's 2 more things I wanted to bring out. She had just walked in and then walked out. Susan Elaine Packer, if you want to have a magnet on your badge rather than a pin, see Susan Elaine Packer. It'll cost you a couple bucks or whatever, but if you want the magnet, go see her, okay? The other thing, American Square Dance Magazine. If you do not have a subscription to American Square Dance Magazine, see Bill before you go. Every caller, every dance leader, everybody should have a subscription to American Square Dance Magazine. There's a tremendous amount of information in that magazine that allows you to be somewhat of authority, to answer questions for your dancers, to know what's going on around the country. There's products, goods, and services. There's articles. You just kind of have a pulse of what's going on, not only here in the United States, but abroad. So if you have not and don't currently have a subscription to the magazine, see Bill. They do a great job, and it's a great magazine. So, and he did not pay me to say that.
Bill Boyd, American Square Dance Magazine. Let it be noted, I did not pay him for that. I've been paying for that for years. The one thing I did do, I didn't get it to CALLERLAB in time. In your packet, there was supposed to have been a discount set of coupons. Kinko's is making me up some right now. There'll be discounts out there. Susan Lane ran me a couple bucks off here and there. So that will be here during the convention. Fill it out. All CALLERLAB members, you get a discount.
Super. Thanks, Bill. That's great. Any other questions? Now, there's going to be a karaoke session after this session right here. KJ artist Phil Farmer back there, you're going to set up a few things and get some things going. And if there's not any further questions, thank you guys for coming out to the orientation session. Thank you for being here at CALLERLAB. We're excited. Before you go, though, John, why don't you say the one more thing? This is John's. Janet brought it out, but it really goes like.
Are you ready?
We're ready.
No badge, no meal, no exceptions.
See ya. Thank you.